Hello, everyone. Section 8.1 has a lot of vocab in it, and so I'm sending along yet another video during vacation week with the hope that if this does take you a lot of time to get through, that it'd be your choice to do it next week, or if you are sitting around on a rainy day like I am and just would prefer to get a head start on next week, you can. All the information is here if you could take notes on it. I started labeling the honors video section 8.1 tape A because section 8.1 will probably take 2 videotapes. Some of these sections may take 3. And also this assignment is the first assignment from section 8.1. There will be another assignment from section 8.1. This one is due Wednesday, April 22nd, if I have the right date, which I think I do. These 2 pages are really, really important. The 2 pages are filled with vocab and some new stuff, I believe, for most of you. So read those 2 pages, take notes on them, and I'm going to try to give you a quick overview of this section. Again, please, 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 reading the sections and taking notes on them. So first of all, I'm going to take a look at how I set up each of my expressions in this section. I wrote them all in standard form. They don't always come to you in standard form, but you always write your final answer in standard form. And what standard form means is from highest degree to lowest degree. And in order to do that, you're going to need to know how to find the degree of a single term and how to find the degree of a polynomial. So over here, even though it's a little out of order, I'm just going to put your attention here that this is in standard form because the degree of this term is 3 and the degree of that term is 0. So it's 3, then 0. It's from basically the highest exponent to the lowest exponent, but some of the expressions have more than one variable term, so you have to be aware of that. This is in standard form because the degree of this term is 2, the degree of this term is 1, and the degree of this term is 0. This one could go in any order except that has to be the last term. The degree is 1, the degree is 1, the degree is 1 because each of those has an exponent of 1, and the 9 has a degree of 0. So back to what we're looking at over here. There's another term that's used to describe our expressions, and it's based on how many terms are in the expression. And I would think on this videotape, you may have to watch it more than once, so keep that in mind. This term here is a monomial. Mono means 1, there's 1 term, and that term has a degree to it. So in order to figure out what the degree is, we look at the exponents. The constant has a degree of 0, so we're discounting that. So in my first monomial, the exponent is 1, so the degree of this term has a degree of 1. And then once we've determined the degree, we can also name it using our mathematical vocabulary. If it has a degree 1, it's a linear relationship. Every single equation that we dealt with in chapter 5 and even throughout chapter 6, they were all linear relationships, whether they were in standard form or slope-intercept form, point-slope form, or any other form. They were to the degree 1. It might have been y to the first equals m times x to the first plus b, whatever the y-intercept is. So every single equation, if you go looking through chapter 5 and chapter 6, everything was a linear relationship because it had a degree of 1. So we got to learn new vocab. When I look at problem number 2, this exponent, it's not written in, it's a 1. The degree of this monomial is 2 plus 1. The degree is 3. And if we were to label that mathematically, this would be a cubic, because it is to the 3rd power. And then in problem number 3, this monomial is going to have a degree of 2. And we would call it quadratic. For those of you who studied that a little bit last year, when we get into chapter 9, all of the relationships that we study are going to be quadratic. So if the degree of the expression is 1, we call it a linear relationship. If the degree is 2, we call it quadratic. If the degree is 3, we call it cubic. And all that vocab is in those, contained within these 2 pages. And then if we go beyond a degree 3, we then call it 4th degree, 5th degree, 6th degree, 7th degree, 8th degree, so on and so forth. So the only ones that we have special vocab for at this point would be our linear, our quadratics, and our cubics. And so if we go on, there's 2 things we noticed. We found the degree of the monomial. Monomial meant it had 1 term. And then within that, if it had a degree 1, we called it linear. Degree 2, we called it quadratic. And degree 3, we called it cubic. And then moving over to the other 3 examples, name the polynomial based on its degree and the number of terms. So in these examples, I didn't give you monomials. I gave you more than 1 term. If we have 2 terms, you can think of bicycle, binoculars. Bi means 2. So this is going to be a binomial because it has 2 terms. And then we look at the degree. First of all, I already mentioned it's in standard form because it goes from highest degree to lowest degree. And it would be, we want to come up with its name based on its degree. So this polynomial, if we want to know the degree, poly means many, many terms, and it can be, all of these could technically be polynomials because if they have more than 1 term, we can call it a polynomial. But normally, if there's 1 term, monomial, 2 terms, binomial, 3 terms, trinomial, and then any number of terms beyond 3, we call it a polynomial. So this one is truly the polynomial, or if there are 5 terms, or 6 terms, or 7 terms. And a reminder from before, a term is separated by an addition sign, a subtraction sign, an equal sign, or an inequality symbol. And then, so here, it has a degree 3 because your polynomials have a degree of whatever the degree is of the highest term within the expression. So when I look at this expression, this term has a degree of 0. This term has a degree of 3. So the degree of the binomial is 3. So the degree of that binomial, I'm going to switch out colors here. Oh, maybe red would be good. The degree of that binomial is 3. And then if we go down to problem number 2, I already mentioned it. It's in standard form. I know it's in standard form because the degree of this term is 2. The degree of this term is 1. The degree of this term, which is a constant, is 0. And mentioning in the reading, you're going to notice that if the constant term is a 0, it actually has no degree. I'm kind of just avoiding that at this point because I feel like you have enough to take in at this point without having to think of one more thing. So degree 2, degree 1, the degree of the constant is 0. There are 3 terms. This is called a trinomial because it has 3 terms. Think of a tricycle that has 3 wheels, and that's where the vocab term comes from. And my trinomial, if I wanted to name it, the highest degree in this trinomial is a degree 2, because this is a 2, this is a 1, this is a 0. So if the highest degree of the polynomial is a 2, then this expression is called a degree 2. And then we're going to go back and do the vocab. So in the first one, if it has a degree 3, we call it a cubic. If it has a degree 2, we call it a quadratic. And then looking at our third example here, I intentionally gave you an example that had more than 3 terms, so that you would call this a polynomial, many terms. So this is called a polynomial, and that means it has many terms. And that polynomial, if I want to find the degree of that polynomial, I look at each individual term and find out which one has the highest degree. A degree of 1, a degree of 1, a degree of 1, and a degree of 0. So in this problem here, the degree of the polynomial is 1. And we would call this a linear relationship. And then that is the overview in order to be able to do these. I think there's a couple of problems in there where you have to add and subtract like terms, but we covered that every time we did solving equations. You know that you're only allowed to add and subtract like terms, so I think any of the other problems that didn't have to do with the vocab or the degree of a monomial or the degree of a polynomial, I think everything else was review. So I do need you to go ahead, read that section, take notes, watch the video again, and then complete those problems. They're going to be due Wednesday of next week. Thank you guys.